just let that be. Just rubbing down the self-adhesive copper with a piece of scrap wood. Okay, so my next step is to position this set of insulating fiber and transfer the mounting holes. So the two holes that I drilled are here and there, and they went through both pieces of this insulating material. And now my next step is to number each one of the holes according to the diagram. I managed to have this upside down as I started numbering it. So I'm going to flip it over and start again and try to do it right this time. That's going to be awesome. Okay, to summarize what I've done, I've mounted the power transformer with the 832 screws and then the grounding lugs that I soldered up earlier. And then I also have the output transformer mounted, and that's on the other side. The rubber grommets are placed in the holes with the appropriate wires coming through the appropriate holes. Okay, so I have my meter set up that if I short the ground, if I connect the leads, we get a tone. And so I just go through and touch each lug in turn. So right now I'm mounting these tube sockets, and it can be a difficult reach to try to pinch the little nut that goes in there. So here's a little nut that I have to get onto that screw, and so on my finger I've got some double stick tape, and I can just pick it up with the double stick tape, and then where I really have a hard time squeezing it, I can get down in there and just hold it enough in position to go ahead and get the thread started. I'm in. And that goes pretty fast. This diagram is showing the chassis like this. And so I'm looking at this plate that's on the inside, and there it is, that's the orientation. And so I kind of have to imagine how it looks on the outside. It's a little tricky. If I look at this, the number 1 pin should be down. It's next to 8. So 1 and 8 should be down, but there aren't any numbers on the inside that I can see. But I'm looking here, and I have 1 and 8. And that's toward the opening. So I'm pretty sure I have this right. Now these nuts have integrated lock washers, which seem to be pretty effective. Worry about all this stuff vibrating loose. But once it grabs onto that chassis, it's on there pretty well. So now it looks like we have, it was a 5Y3 and a 6V6 is here. And then these are the 12AY7 and 12AX7 tube sockets, along with a speaker jack and a speaker extension jack. So okay, I want to double check all these screws and make sure they're tight, make sure everything's tight, and then it's time to move to the next step. The coolest thing about this so far is if you'll notice the volume, it goes to 12. Look at that. So Nigel can stuff it. I don't care what Nigel's amps do. This one goes to 12. So I need to get this resistor on here. Focus, focus, focus. I got those focusing issues figured out on my camera, so you can see how these resistors will lace around these input jacks. Now the documentation on this is excellent, and I really like the check marks. So right here we're going on to step 27. So I just read this through, and then I look at what I'm doing. Let me back this off a little bit. There we go. So I'll read through, think about what it said, and then I'll translate to the chassis and I'll practice what it said. And then I'll come back and I read it again, make sure I fully understand what was said, and then I go ahead and execute. So this morning, I have to get this bow rehaired before I get to play with the amplifiers. And so I've got to make the plug that goes into this mortise. And this is obviously a little bit too big. So we'll work on making it smaller. It's always harder to cut that end grain. Okay, so now we're close. I don't feel like this is tedious work, but it might be tedious to watch. This fit has to be about as excellent as you can be in order for this whole system to work. The system locks itself together, and so the hair interacts with the plug and the shape of the mortise, and all the shapes of the plug and the mortise have to be matched up. And it's just a mechanical interaction. So the harder you pull, the tighter the joint gets. That was a pretty bold cut. I might regret it. Ooh. Okay, so that's really close. That's very, very close. I'm ready to try the hair now. I'd like for that to be just straight. That looks pretty good. All right, then we'll try this plug. All right, that's not working. All right, so my initial fit is the plug is just a little bit too big. So I'm going to trim just a touch more off and then come back and try again. So the worst thing that happens is that I'm having to make a new plug if things go wonky. This may be a little loose, but we'll see. But we're looking okay. We've got a 50-50 chance that we're going to succeed here. So we'll just put a gentle pressure. Okay, that's in there pretty good. Now we'll check it. Just let me put the head plug in. There it is. It's holding the hair. but we have to test that. And the way I do it is to gently, obviously we don't want to break the bow, that would be annoying and expensive. I'm going to give it a good tug. All right, that does not come out. So it's just a mechanical interaction of the plug in the hair and the mortise, and that works. So I got kind of excited and I soldered up this entire eyelet board and didn't take any footage of how I did that. So I'll give you a quick description and we'll have some close-ups of what's going on the board. But basically I grabbed each component as called for in the instructions and laced them into the holes, and then when everything was laced in the holes, I double checked everything and soldered all the connections. And so that is all there is to it. Now this was a large part of the build. It was relatively straightforward, and there really weren't any problems. Everything went together very well. So I'm pretty happy with this. And the next thing we're going to do is mount this into the chassis and then finish all the connections from everything that I put in the chassis previous to what is on here. And when all of that is done, then it will be almost over and we'll be just about done with building this particular amplifier. The eyelet board is now in and mounted. A screw here and a screw there. I did notice when I'm torquing that down, a whole bunch of torque might not be a great idea because this is kind of a delicate fiber material, and I realized that I might be overstressing it, so I backed those screws off a little bit. Okay, so I've taken these two 100 ohm resistors and tied the leads together and soldered it to a ground wire, which will next get soldered to the ground lug here. So I've caught my first mistake with my look at the instructions, read it, go do it, go back and reread the instructions. And when you see what's going on, it's pretty easy. The idea is you made a mistake, but I connected this wire to that, and it should have been this wire to that. The original wire goes over here somewhere. So I'll just put some heat on here, pull that wire back out, and then just fix it. I'll correct it. So this morning I started here, wiring all these connections. You'll remember that I miswired one of these and I got that sorted. Then we're just moving here. Those are all soldered. So soldered, everything's soldered. This was from a previous step. I haven't messed with that today. This all got soldered. And then this is ready to be soldered. So I've run the wires according to the diagram. I'm waiting for my iron to heat up and I'll solder all the connections. There are 5 of them. I believe that all the wiring is complete. I did go through and check each and every connection and found that at some point I had not soldered that wire. So once I did that, I soldered it, and then I went through and I checked each and every connection again to make sure that at least no wire is left unsoldered. So the hardest part of this whole project so far has physically been mounting this completed chassis into the cabinet. The magnet on this speaker was actively trying to pull this thing out of my hands as I was putting it up, so I had to use some clamps and stuff to get creative. But that's mounted, and there are 4 or 5 different things I have to do and checks that have to be passed, but we're getting very close now. Okay, so the first power test has been completed. The amp is plugged in down here, and my lamp is on. So that's cool. Got a glowing lamp. I am now checking for smoke and unusual smells, but other than what's normally going on in here, we seem okay. So in any case, at this point, I've got to be monkeying around in here with voltage, and this is no joke. The voltages in here are lethal. So I'm going to be putting the camera away for the rest of all of my power checks. And then when it looks like it checks out, or if it looks like it doesn't check out, I'll be back with you. So there is the full circuit with the tubes in. I have done all the electrical connections. I've played the instrument through this amplifier. So I just wanted to give you a shot at all of this and what it looks like on the bench. And I'm going to button up the back, put all the panels on, plug it back in, and we'll do a full demonstration of tones. For this initial demonstration, I'm going to use this guitar that I made, and pretty much I've got all the knobs set on a value of 5. Both of the volume knobs are going to stay on 3. The tone knob will be on 6, just like you see. I'm not going to touch anything. And then I have 4 options for inputs: normal, 1 and 2, bright, 1 and 2. Okay, so this is normal 1. Normal 2. So this is bright 1. And bright 2. Okay, so there's that, and now I'm going to crank the volume up and see what happens. I'm going to go up to about 8. So that's on bright 2, volume 8, and I'm going to go. Oh, but I've got 2 volume knobs. Hang on, this is kind of crazy. Let's see what happens here. Now both volume knobs are on 8. That could have been more spectacular, huh? So I'm going to turn this all the way up to 12. On both of them. Both volumes are at 12. I'm on bright 1. Let's see what happens. I think that sounds cool. There's a very tasteful amount of breakup. This is nice. volume's almost completely down on the guitar here. So I finished up the amp build yesterday, and then today I've spent quite a bit of time working on this viola top, which is almost ready for the sound holes, but I want it a little bit thinner, and I'll finish up tomorrow. So this is the amp. It's about this big. It's very nice. And I just wanted to make some concluding remarks about building the amplifier. It was a tremendous amount of fun. I really congratulate Stewart-Macdonald for putting together something that was so nice to do. But I will tell you there were a couple of issues, and we can talk about that. They were minor, but they were there. So I don't want to make it sound like everything was perfect. The biggest issue was mounting the speaker on the mounting screws. The way they were provided didn't quite fit right. And so I'm a little bit nervous about the long-term viability of that. But I was able to manage to wiggle that speaker onto those mounting screws and make it work. But I just felt like I was making it work. I didn't feel like it was really perfect. I didn't call Stewart-Macdonald or anything because it works. And so that's that, it works. The other thing, while the Tweed part of this cabinet is nearly flawless, the way all the lines line up, that's really nice. The actual cabinet itself is a little bit warped. And on one of the feet, I had to put a spacer in order to make it sit level. It was just rocking around. Those were absolutely the biggest things. Both of them were manageable. And those two things are the only things that make it not a flawless experience. But I could certainly deal with that. So, you know, I think that's pretty much it. I really like the amplifier kit. I bought this from Stewart-Macdonald, and I just thought it would be fun to document a little bit, putting it together in case somebody was actually interested in doing it, or if you just were curious of how it goes. So anyway, I'm really happy with everything, and this is really cool. And I have to wait until everybody's off the phone before I can play because it's a little loud. So that's kind of nice. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I very much thank you for watching.